Hi, Bimal. Good afternoon. Lovely to have you with us today. We've known each other a while, and while I know a lot about you, I thought a slightly deeper introduction will be helpful for our viewers and listeners. You've been working with hundreds of companies across the world. Apart from your corporate role, where you've led global companies in the human resource function, in addition, you've been doing a lot of work with senior professionals on the coaching side. So I thought, who better than you to have a good view, a 30,000-foot view and a ground level view of what is happening today in the workplace? And I say this from a very specific point of view. We are at the end of the year, and working professionals are always doing all the other resolutions that they're doing, which are not for working professionals only, like join the gym, lose weight,
Yeah.
be better, and so on. But there's a lot of important resolution making and reaffirmation of your own plans
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I thought, why don't we talk to you and gain some insights based both on your long-term experience and what you've seen today happening in the workplace and the corporate sector,
Yeah.
specifically around the agenda of what to leave behind as the year ends,
Yeah.
and what to take ahead. I'm keeping it broad so that
Yeah.
you
Sure.
could add the necessary elements of leaving
Yes.
behind and take ahead.
Yes.
So with that, I'd
Yeah.
like you to please jump in and share your thoughts.
No, thanks, Vijay, firstly for inviting me to the chat, because I think we often have a lot of thoughts, but you don't often get an opportunity to express them in a forum like this, if I may call it that. So thanks for that. And also, I think, while I don't personally make a lot of resolutions, especially around weight management and such other things, but I think it's good to do a little bit of a reflection and think about jobs, careers, workplace, which is where I have operated almost all throughout my career at least. Right? So I think the first thing I want to start with is people often think about doing things, okay, and which is basically that, let me load my plate a lot more. Okay? And like you said, one of the first things I would say that people should think about is what is it that they are going to leave behind, and that leaving behind could be in terms of skills, capabilities, thought process, but more important, I think, in terms of attitudes. Okay? And one of the things I want to kick off with this discussion is saying that one of the attitudes people want to think about, if you will, and start to build is that in life there is no absolute solution for any individual person, vis-a-vis the careers, right? It's a trade-off. Depending on what trade-off you are willing to make, there is always a price, there is always a gain, right? So as people go into the new year and start thinking about workplaces, as you called it, I think people should think about the workplace in context of what is the trade-off I'm willing to make to be successful in a workplace, because workplaces are changing all the time, and we can talk about that a lot more as we go along.
So if we take that approach, that workplaces are changing a lot. So have you seen any two or three changes last year from where you can begin constructing the ladder, the snakes and ladders, if I may call it, the
Yeah.
snakes to drop and the ladders to climb?
Yes. Yeah. So I think I would point out maybe three changes, right? One is that the whole AI stuff has accelerated. What now people are calling Gen AI, which actually is bringing both hope and fear to workplaces, and that's happened in the last 18 months or so much more rapidly than it had happened in the past. Even though AI is not a new thing in that sense, right? But in the last 18 months, you can clearly see a significant shift and a lot more talk around that. That's one. I think the second thing is that people are starting to get a lot more comfortable about gig careers. So even very qualified people, are now talking about gig careers and the fact that they would like to lead life in a very different way. So therefore, the definition of career itself is changing quite a bit, and that's something again we are seeing in the last 12 to 24 months much more. It started during COVID, but the acceleration of that has, I think, happened in the last 1 year or so. And I think the final thing I would say is that there's a lot more debate happening around the difference between becoming a generalist versus a specialist. Okay. I think there is still a lot of confusion, but when I look at careers now, I think people are struggling with that question that in order to succeed in the next. So if I talk about a 30-year-old or a 35 or even a 40-year-old, people are asking that question to themselves much more, saying, if I'm a journalist, what happens to me? If I'm a specialist, what happens to me? And of course, we are taking the polymath thing out of the equation right now, assuming that, not many of us can actually, even hope to be in that space. Yeah. But those are the three big ones, I'm seeing, Vijay.
So, AI, gig, and generalist versus specialist are the three key developments that are interesting to watch and
Yeah,
may affect everybody's careers.
correct.
So, given this fact, now we can't lump everybody in the same,
Hmm.
an IT architect versus somebody, a civil engineer building bridges. They have completely different career trajectories, and the gig economy doesn't really affect a structural engineer
Hmm.
building bridges as much as it affects a web designer. Uh, but is it possible at all to lump one or two, three things that people can uh, do
Hmm.
to make themselves better next year or in the coming years? Would
Yeah.
you want to touch upon them?
So firstly, let me debate that a little bit. What you talked about structural engineers, because I think even many of those jobs, and one of the great examples is the oil industry, or the excavation industry, for example, where a lot of the jobs which tended to be permanent earlier are actually now getting done in the gig way, right? So I think I'm arguing saying that, like a web designer job, it is quite likely that in the future even a civil engineer may end up doing a gig kind of a job, get in, do a project for 1 month, and then you don't have another job, you go do something else. And but anyway, that's let's leave that to the side and start looking at some generalities, as you called it, right? So I think let me go back to my argument about trade-offs, right? And I'm saying that the first thing a person, particularly younger people, need to do is to start building a context for their trade-offs. Okay, so for example, if I am sitting in Cochin, I have a family commitment of a particular kind. I want to live a lifestyle of a particular kind, and so on and so forth. I should first almost draw out what is my context in which I will make the trade-offs. Okay, and I think that's the first thing people have to do. I think people sometimes intuitively do it, but we don't do it deliberately and scientifically enough. So I would say that that will be common across professions, across age groups, even. But for younger people, perhaps very, very important that what is my context over the next 10 years, or 5 years if you think 10 years is too long, in which I need to make the trade-offs. Okay, and 5 years or 10 years later, though, that context may change, but understanding that context is important. The second thing I would say, which cuts across all professions almost, irrespective of age, level, function, etc., is about you know choosing at least one thing where you can say, this is something I can do better than anybody else around me. Okay, just one thing. It could be a very small thing. And again, I'm saying very deliberately small thing because people tend to pick very wide set of things to learn and build skills, and so on and so forth. But sometimes people forget the fact that you may have a particular talent, you may have a particular skill, irrespective of what profession or function you are in. If you get really good at that, you know I think you will be sought out for that particular thing. And this is something which I've talked about extensively in the past in some of the writings I've done. But our ability to identify what is that one thing, is very important. Okay. And I think the final thing I will say, and because I talk in threes, so let me add the third one as a generality across the professions, and whether it's engineers or MBAs, or you're a chartered accountant, or whatever, a structural engineer, and so on and so forth. I think being aware of the fact of the other areas of work that are touching your function. Okay, so for example, you could be a chartered accountant. I am taking that as a random example. But if there are, accounting processes and standards which are changing around the world, they will at some point of time impact your job as a chartered accountant in India. You know, so being aware of the adjacencies as I think about them is going to be very, very important, right? So those are the top three things, in my mind, which, irrespective of the profession, you can actually start thinking about.
Okay, so context, small things, and adjacencies.
Correct.
So this requires awareness, if I am correct. I mean, you have to be self-aware, and you also have to have some understanding of how to figure this out.
Right.
Now, most of us are caught up in our daily jobs, and we slog it out from 9 to 5 or 9 to 9. Uh, how do we figure this out? Is there any clue you can give
Yeah.
somebody how to
So
figure this out?
maybe I should have said that earlier as a so it is a reflective process, and it which leads to then awareness and all that. But also interestingly, one of the things, Vijay, which we see is that the environment is giving you feedback all the time. Okay, actually, it's not whether it's your immediate work environment, it's broader set of things you read, you study, you do all of it. And not in a formal way, but you pick up signals. Somebody around you is doing this. You go to and I'll give you a couple of examples a little later. But I think building that reflective and self-awareness itself is a maybe step zero to the other three things which we spoke about earlier, that build that skill to reflect, make time for it. And I think some of the best younger people I meet in my role and job, often across companies and across other places, these are people who are very clear that they will spend some time on a daily basis almost, either doing reading or just spending time by themselves. There's one guy I met yesterday who said, I play the flute every morning for about 20 minutes because my mind is only focused on that. And, then it allows me to relax and therefore, think through other things much better than I would do otherwise if I'm doing a 9 to 9 job, as you would say. So yes, but also, I would say that one of the tricks is to be able to note all of this down and periodically review it. Because one of the things in today's world which happens is we think of something, we catch it, we build a pattern, and we lose it very quickly in the next 24 hours. So I would encourage certainly, people that now, a lot of people call it journaling, but I'm saying forget journaling. If you can do some doodling and noting down in your notebook and keep reviewing that on a regular basis, that itself is a great thing to start off this whole process with, actually.
Great. So self-reflection and taking notes about what's happening around you is a good way to figure out what you can, that one little thing that you can do better, or
Correct.
that one little thing that's adjacent to your role that you can
Correct.
help you find. So should we say that these are the three things that you would outline as uh, the troika of things for 2025?
Yes,
That
I
young.
would say that very much. I would say that very much, and maybe I'll just build on that, Vijay. That when we speak about trade-offs, I think uh, as a cherry on top of that troika, as you called it, I think one of the things I am becoming clearer about in my own mind, that I think that will apply to a lot of younger people as you go into 2025, is that uh, the world is going to make uh, us force us to behave in certain ways, and it'll almost feel like I need to do A and I need to do B and I need to do C and I need to do D and maybe MNOPQR as well to succeed. Okay, but I would say that early enough, if you figure out that I don't need to do all of it, I really need to become better at one or two things, and more important, that I'm clear about the path I want to take. That I think simplifies choice making much more from a career and workplace point of view, right? If I'm clear that I don't want to become like a general manager, I'm very happy not leading people. I would rather be with doing something which intellectually satisfies me. I would like to do, for example, design, or I want to do whatever XYZ. Then I think that simplifies the choices. So one of the things I would say, in addition to what you said, is that uh, simplify your choices. Don't make it so complex that you're just running around all the time, wasting mental and otherwise energy, and which doesn't actually allow you to take a path. You're just running in circles then.
So could I say that's a useful piece of advice for a slightly older professional who spent some time
Hmm,
in their
hmm, hmm,
workplace,
hmm, hmm.
maybe 6 7 years, and they got a hang of everything.
Yeah.
Uh, but for a younger executive or a professional, she might not yet know that, right?
Yeah,
So
some of it.
how would you give her a differentiation for that
So,
state?
so if I talk of this young lady, let's say, I'm taking that as a starting point. Whoever this young lady is, let's say she's 24, just passed out of college maybe the last year or a couple of years back and all that. I like to think of this problem as an inner voice problem and an outer voice problem. Okay. I think the youngsters are much more plugged in today, including social media information they get from wherever they have studied, their peers, and all of that, right? So there's a huge amount of external, sort of stimulus, if you will, you're getting, right? And then there is the inner voice, and the inner voice is actually almost intuitively telling you that, you have your own experiences, even though they're at the workplace, the kind of people you move with, what background do you come from, what are the predispositions you have, and so on and so forth. And even though, like you're saying, the older people have a lot of experiences, from the outside and maybe lived life in a particular way, I think the younger people have a lot of data, okay, both from the outer voice and the inner voice. And I am in a way arguably saying that their slate is cleaner and their ability to make choices actually is far better because the clutter is much lesser. In fact, for an experienced person, the clutter is much more, and for the younger person, the clutter is much lesser, and therefore, uh, if they can work on this whole reflective thing and balance the inner and the outer voice, their ability to make choices will actually be sharper. In many cases, of course, they may need a mentor or a coach, or multiple mentors and coaches. So I would certainly encourage younger people to have a sparring partner, as I call it, right? Have a sparring partner in a slightly more maybe somebody a little more senior to you, maybe not an oldie, but certainly somebody who's 3-4 years more senior to you, brings in a little bit of practical experience to the table, and that sparring partner can actually help you in bringing in a little bit of experience which you talk about. But choice making is far simpler if you're able to cut out the crap, if I may call it that in that language.
Brilliant. So you've actually capsulized, which suits today's world, a lesson into just 2 words, 4 words: inner voice and outer voice. That coming from your own reflection and that you gauge from external influences, and you merge the two. And I guess in the end, it's your own mental makeup that will help you decide where you go. So that's very valuable,
Yeah.
and both the younger and the older cohorts can pick up from that.
Right.
So there's a lot of good stuff that we have now. We have established on what habits you can pick up and what uh, we're not talked about skills because that's a
Yeah.
totally different domain.
Correct.
What habits can help you move forward? Now, are there the other side, the red flags? What should you not do? What are the snakes that
Yeah.
will bring you down, or you should drop them down?
I mentioned that very briefly earlier, but there is this whole school of thought, if I may, and sometimes our with younger people, sometimes parents' ambitions pushes people into those. So you are trying to dabble in a lot of things with the assumption that you'll become good at many things. Okay? So I use the word polymath, and there's a theory which is going around saying that you should be a polymath to try and be successful in the future. So on Monday evening you're doing violin classes, and on Wednesday mornings you're doing maths classes, and then you're playing tennis, and you're doing this and that, and all of that, as long as you're doing it for fun, you're doing it for broader, personal enjoyment and hobby, it's all fine. But from a workplace and career point of view, I think one of the red flags, to use that word, is that uh, trying to do too much actually can be detrimental because you're losing a lot of energy and time in that bargain. And the only, as they say, the only perishable thing is time, right? So once the time goes, you don't get it back, right? So I always, encourage my coaches, and I have a few mentees as well, younger people, is that be extremely guarded about your time. I think people don't fully understand that time is critical, and once that day is gone, the day is gone, kind of thing. So from a red flag perspective, what I'm saying, Vijay, is that you almost need to be mindful of anything you're doing which is a wasteful activity and not necessarily adding to your objectives or your, where you want to go as a direction. That's one.
Great. The first point being about time as the most valuable asset in life and how you need to
Yeah.
optimize it and not put too much on your plate. So that brings us to your second point, I guess.
So actually, a couple of more points. So first is that these days I think a lot of youngsters take a lot of pressure. And they go very deeply into something, put in a lot of hours, put in a lot of effort, and then when they don't succeed, I think we're seeing a lot of cases of depression, mental health issues, and so on and so forth. So one of the things I would say as a red flag is that you know one needs to be clear that in spite of all the best intentions, effort, all of that, there are many other environmental factors which sometimes will lead to a situation where you'll feel like a failure, or you will fail because competition is better. Circumstances change, something else happens. And one of the red flags, which I often tell young people to watch out for, is that don't invest yourself so much that you get hurt at the end of it, right? It's a career at the end of the day, right? It's a job at the end of the day. There are enough opportunities. You're young. There's a long way to go, and one failure is not the end of the road. So that's one. I think the other red flag, to watch out for is that um, almost saying if you go to too many people as advisors, the chances are that you'll be running around with all of their advice not making a great deal of sense. So choose very carefully who do you choose as a mentor or advisor, and think through very carefully before taking action, because you can listen to many people, but taking action, as we talked about earlier, is important that it fits your context, your circumstances, your strengths, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the red flags to watch out for, certainly for young people.
Okay, so time, taking too much pressure on hand, and being careful about who you take advice from,
Correct.
and making the right choices.
Correct.
So these are very I would say these are very useful things that people should do anyway. Not just that it's the end of this year,
Yeah.
but anything comes to your mind randomly about what's happened so far, which probably you shouldn't be doing. People are saying, I know everyone's got. For example, I was talking to somebody, and everyone's got so habituated from working from home that they stopped interacting with people, and probably it's time to restart some of those human processes,
Yeah.
which are not conducive. We are social animals and so on. While it was great at one point, it's not
Correct.
not a good continuing habit. So is there anything else that comes to your mind like
Yeah,
that?
actually, two habits and two very specific things which I think is useful, early in the career, certainly. One, I think personal grooming. I think somewhere in the last few years we've lost this thing about that I need to, I would not say look good, but look professional and look, because if you're in a career, you're in a job, you're meeting other people, I think just wearing the right clothes, and I'm not saying rich clothes or expensive clothes, but, shaving, or if you have a beard, you trim properly. For ladies, wearing the right kind of attire and all that. I think that's a very crucial habit which I think people need to build. And I think the second thing is about asking for help. Okay, and I'm asking for help does not come easily to the younger generation who've sort of literally born with the phone in hand, if I may call it that. I think those are two very, very specific habits and capabilities I think worth building.
Great. That sinks in with probably how COVID and all the things that have happened in the last few years have altered the way we function as a society.
Yeah.
So it's probably time to take a reset on those issues. Wonderful. So we've had a lovely time discussing uh, things that we need to pick up as we go into the next year, and things we need to drop, what I call the snakes and ladders
Yeah.
approach to building your own set of priorities for next year. And coming to the end of this wonderful talk, uh, it might be interesting for you to just throw out randomly your top picks
Hmm.
for the
Out of the conversation.
what to take forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the many choices you made.
Yeah. So I think I have to make some choices, as you said, about what I pick up out of the lot of stuff we've spoken about. So I'll pick sort of three. Okay. So one, uh, building the capability to cut out the noise and look at and reflect on your own circumstances and context, because your career can be built and has to be built very uniquely based on your context. And being aware of that and making choices in that realm is very important. That's number one. Number two, instead of trying to learn too many things all at the same time, focus on one or two things which you can be outstandingly good at compared to everybody else around you in whatever operating environment you are in, right? And thirdly, I think, uh, don't take life too seriously. Don't take too much of pressure, because particularly for younger people, there's a long way to go. One failure doesn't mean that it's the end of life. So pick that up and run with it, and you will succeed. Yeah, so those are my top three picks.
Excellent. And I relate to those top three things, and one can go back in one's life and see that each time these things have made sense. It's been lovely talking to you, Bimal, and I hope we can catch you some other time again, given your busy schedule, and have another conversation which can help working professionals, both young and old, figure out what to do better in some aspect. And thank you again.
Yeah, happy to have been party to this conversation. I think this is a lovely conversation. Also clarifies one's own mind. So again, thank you very much for inviting me for this chat.
Thanks.